Joe Biden says a medical condition could cause him to drop out of the 2024 presidential debate. During a pre-taped interview with BET, Biden said a doctor's concern would prompt him to reconsider his candidacy. Now, that legal medical emergency would have to take place before August 1st, when the DNC delegates begin digitally voting for the Democratic nominee. Blaze TV's Steve Deace asserts that Donald Trump is more of a force against the darkness than American churches. Steve will break down his journey from DeSantis to Trump and why America's last defense is an anti-hero. And Blaze TV's Liz Wheeler tells us the real reason the would-be assassin tried to kill Donald Trump. We've got those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to The Chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, July 17th. It's been 5 days since the leading presidential candidate was shot, and yet we know surprisingly little about the shooter's motives. Matthew Peterson, the editor-in-chief of Blaze News, is with me, and we have a very special guest. Liz Wheeler, the host of Blaze TV's upcoming Liz Wheeler Show, is also with us. Now, Liz, it's not just Thomas Crooks that tried to kill Donald Trump. Who do you say the real culprit is?
Hi, Jill. Hi, Matt. You know, this is a hot button topic that has got a lot of us wondering what exactly led to this event being able to happen. And I say this using very precise language because I don't want to believe that the Secret Service intentionally allowed a would-be assassin to fire shots to target a president of the United States for assassination. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to sound like a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. I don't want to live in a nation where a government agency would be so corrupted to its core that that would be the case. That being said, if we list the evidence that we have before us, we know that the family, the parents of this shooter, called law enforcement on the day of the rally and warned law enforcement that their son was missing, that they were worried about him, and that he was a threat. What did law enforcement do? Nothing that we know of, seemingly nothing. We know that 26 minutes passed from the time that law enforcement spotted the shooter on the roof until they took action. We know that bystanders nearby were begging law enforcement to do something about the man with the gun on the roof with a direct shot to the former president of the United States, a candidate for president of the United States, again, while he was speaking on stage. We know that the head of the Secret Service, when asked why on earth a rooftop with such proximity to the president of the United States was left unguarded, said, well, we don't want to put agents up there because the roof was sloped. What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? A sloped roof prevented you from protecting the president of the United States, your one job as a Secret Service agent. And we also know that Secret Service had neglected requests from the Trump campaign to bulk up security for the president. And we have seen nobody resign in the wake of this. And the reason that I think no resignations is significant is the question should be asked, can all of this be explained by sheer incompetence? Can someone actually be this stupid and this bad at their job that they could let this happen? And the answer to that question is yes. Theoretically, we shouldn't underestimate the incompetence of government bureaucracy. But at the same time, if that were the explanation, just incompetence and stupidity and perhaps DEI, then we would see widespread resignations at the leadership of the Secret Service. And moreover, we would see Democrat leadership calling for widespread resignation of the leadership of the Secret Service. And yet, Jill, we see none of that. So no explanation is off the table for me at this point, as much as I do not want to believe it was something the Secret Service intentionally left unguarded.
Yeah, Liz, I mean, I think that a lot of that's very well said. And I said this in the very beginning, and I think everyone in right-leaning media should stick to it. As soon as that event happened, you just looked around at the country and what had just transpired, and you think it's essential that this investigation and everything they're uncovering be absolutely transparent to the maximum possible. And the reason for that is even if we didn't know anything yet, right? It was just 5 minutes after the event. We already know that this country is a powder keg, that both sides distrust each other, and that millions of people like myself distrust the government to investigate itself, never mind, alleged criminals. So that's a situation in which we find ourselves. And as you point out, I mean, if there's no transparency, if we don't know anything about what's going on, right? And as you point out, we know for a fact that all these people failed in various ways. This is leading to a very uncomfortable place very quickly. And so absolutely, people should not be spouting conspiracy theories or, rushing there. But I hold the same question close at hand that you do, which is, we're almost at the level of such incompetency that you have to prove to me that it's truly incompetence. And that's not just me. Jill and I have been talking to people throughout the country, experts in their field. Yesterday, we were speaking to Eric Prince. I mean, I had to ask him the same question that many people were asking him online, which is, if Trump asked, would you go help? Because it looks like the Secret Service and the federal government needs assistance in this matter pronto.
Yeah, and I want to make one point too. When we're using this phrase conspiracy theory, I think it has become somewhat of a joke for a lot of us, because all of these so-called conspiracy theories, according to the left, something they've labeled us with for the past 8 years, most of them have come true, provably true. And so a lot of us wear that as a badge of honor. But one tactic that I want us as conservatives and Republicans and Democrats who are common sense as well, one thing I want us to recognize is a tactic that the left is using right now. They are trying to conflate this idea, this proposition that someone in the upper echelons of either the Secret Service or the Biden administration called a hit on President Trump. Something I don't think any of us believe. I haven't heard anyone serious present this as a realistic theory, but the media and the left are trying to make our questions, they're trying to conflate our questions with that sort of absurd theory. And we should not allow them to do that, because what we are asking is not a conspiracy theory. I suppose it would be somewhat of a conspiracy. But when I say conspiracy, remember too, we saw all those pictures of the female Secret Service agent who is overweight and short, had trouble holstering her gun, was very flustered. The video is frankly embarrassing to see these female Secret Service agents try to get an over 6 foot president into the vehicle. And they were pretty rightfully labeled DEI hires. I mean, they weren't hired because they were the most capable individual for the job there. They were hired because they're women. They were tokens. And it makes me sad to say this. This was the inevitable result of DEI, which we all predicted. But the purpose of DEI, when it comes to the intentions of the left, isn't actually to elevate women. It isn't to elevate Black people. It isn't to elevate, so-called marginalized minorities. The purpose of DEI is to create an environment of chaos. Because when you have dispensed with, gotten rid of meritocracy, which is what DEI does, you have inevitably chaos. And what does chaos lead to? It leads to tyranny and violence. So no one's saying that someone at the upper echelons of the Secret Service called this hit. But what we are saying is deliberate policies from the left in our federal government agencies led to this, in addition to the fact that there were decisions made that are absolutely mind-boggling. You don't even have to be a security expert to know that that's asinine, nearly deadly decision that, fortunately wasn't deadly. But in my opinion, as a devout Catholic Christian, I believe that the only reason the president wasn't hit was the hand of God.
Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory, but if you go back a month ago with Joe Biden, they would call it a cheap fake instead, Liz. Of course, we have to go back to going through and saying Joe Biden, he was perfectly fine 1 month ago. But now we get headline after headline. And the latest one today is that his medical condition, it might have him dropping out of the race sometime soon. So Liz, is this actually foreshadowing something to come, or is this just another headline to get us through the week?
This is where I sort of break with the majority of Republicans and conservatives. I've never thought that Joe Biden was going to drop out. I thought that most of the calls for Biden to drop out were actually a pre-debate tactic. The left and the media wanted to lower everyone's collective expectations of Biden's debate performance to the point that if he got up there and didn't actually like drop dead or poop his pants on live TV, that everyone would be like, oh, look at that. Joe performed a little bit better than we expected. And they could kind of scrape by with that performance. So I never thought it was truly realistic. Also because it's not really realistic to get universal name recognition for a presidential candidate with just, T-minus 4 months until election day. And they don't have a very good candidate to replace Joe Biden. So I've never thought they were going to replace Joe Biden. The only thing that I can think of now that Biden came out today and said, if there was a medical diagnosis, an official medical diagnosis, then that would preclude him from continuing his campaign or he would drop out. First of all, we should put the doctor, the Parkinson's disease expert that visited the White House, I believe it was 8 times, according to reporting by Alex Berenson, in the last 8 months or the last 6 months. We should put him under oath and hear what he has to say about the president's health conditions, because I'm sure there is an official diagnosis. I'm positive there's an official diagnosis. And I could just see Jill Biden, smoke coming out of Jill Biden's ears when Joe said he'd drop out if there was an official diagnosis. The only thing that I can think of, and you have to examine all of these different options, kind of war game the possibilities, is perhaps they want Kamala Harris to be the nominee now that they know that Joe Biden is going to lose following the assassination attempt. I think a lot of us think that Joe Biden is going to lose. This has galvanized a lot of support for Trump. And so if they're looking at this election as an inevitable loss, maybe they want Kamala Harris to be the one that inevitably loses, so that they can point the finger at all of us and say, the only reason that you wouldn't have voted for Kamala Harris is you're racist, and use this to usher in more DEI and critical race theory, et cetera. But I have to say that's my B theory. My A theory is that Biden stays.
I love it. I love it so much. Thanks so much for joining us here today, Liz.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Matt.
Now, Blaze TV, it's not the only place that you can catch Blaze News tonight. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Blaze News tonight and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss any episodes. Now, we'll give you the latest from the RNC when we come back. Joe Biden promised to turn down the political temperature in America, only to follow it up with this gem.
But now they're trying to deny it. They're lying about their Project 2025. They want to deny you freedom, the freedom to vote, have your vote counted. They'd impose a nationwide ban on abortion. This new vice president, do you ever have any doubt, man? Just take a look at what he's been saying. They want to prosecute political enemies. They want to cut Social Security and Medicare, rip away protection from millions of pre-existing conditions, over 400 million people. Stop Medicare from negotiating lower prescription drug prices, risking people's lives, costing the government more money.
I guess the good news is we could understand most of what he was saying there. Chris Bedford, the senior politics editor and Washington correspondent for Blaze News, covers Biden's measured speech in his latest Beltway brief, and he joins us right now from the RNC. So, Chris, why did Biden go on offense just days after Donald Trump was shot?
Well, maybe he forgot. He's not too quick on his feet these days. I think the main reason for this is Democrats generally this campaign season have been largely lacking in any kind of decorum or respect. It's been the same thing since 2016. And Biden himself was already a vicious politician. Remember, this is the guy who said that Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, two of the most milquetoast Republicans of our generation, were, quote, going to put y'all back in chains to a black audience when he was running in 2012 as vice president. So it's no surprise that the decorum broke down here. But another thing is he's somewhat backed into a wall. Donald Trump got shot in the head. The Secret Service completely failed. The Democratic Party is complete confusion. They can't run on just the strength of their candidate because their candidate's strength is so obviously just lacking and draining in public. They have to run that Donald Trump is a dictator, that J.D. Vance, as Senator Chris Murphy, the Democrat, said, is going to install a patriarchal dictatorship of Christianity over the nation. A bunch of college professor words. He's very impressed with himself, obviously. This is the campaign strategy they have. And Democratic donors have been annoyed with it even before this because it was not actually working the polls. It wasn't making the difference that they wanted. But it's really the only card they have to play. So here it is.
Chris, I have to say, we have gone back and forth, and will Biden drop out? And of course, the historic events of Saturday sort of changed everything. And I initially thought it looked very much like people were doing a good job of pushing him on his way out, despite what he was saying. And then, the tragedy unfolded, the miracle unfolded, the hand of God came down, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump is ascending. And in the midst of that, initially, I was talking to Jill before the show. Many of us thought, well, why would you want to change him out now? I mean, who would want to run now, against Donald Trump at this point? But the last 24 hours have really shown this movement is real. It looks to me like, and I wonder what you think, it looks to me like they are pushing hard, and the fact that he is referencing, if he talked to a doctor and he had a medical condition, then he could see himself leaving. It's awful strange stuff coming out of even the Biden camp now. What do you make of that?
Yes, and Senator Chuck Schumer reportedly visited with Joe Biden and talked to him about stepping down. There was that big push just before the assassination attempt, which seemed to have been derailed, to try and have him announce that Kamala Harris would be the nominee when he was down at the LBJ library in Texas. But that trip got canceled because they couldn't think of any way to not attack Donald Trump and be partisan while giving a speech commemorating the Civil Rights Act. The Democrats are in a bit of a bind here. Like, generally, you don't want to put in a star player when you're down by 50 points and there's 10 minutes left in the game. You're just going to risk getting them injured. Maybe Kamala Harris is someone who they don't consider a star player in the first place. And at the same time, there's a kind of a frenzied panic going on in the party. They're looking at the polls. They're looking at the news. They're looking at what the American people think of their chief executive and his decline over the last 4 years. And they're saying, well, something's got to work. We can't have Donald Trump come back. Joe Biden, we've talked about many times on this show, is completely secondary to the will of the Democratic Party. But the will of the Democratic Party doesn't just so easily overcome the president. It's going to have to come down to making him make that decision. And I'm still kind of bearish that he's going to make that decision. I think that Joe Biden likes being president, even if he's not totally there for it.
Well, you're there at the RNC, and people are looking forward to J.D. Vance and his speech coming up tonight. And Mike Lee, who has already joined us here on Blaze News tonight, is very pro-bullish on J.D. Vance.
Yes, absolutely. Mike Lee is hoping that Vance, a populist conservative and one of the very few Republican senators who actually walks the walk as well as talking the talk on those policies, will be very active in the Senate. He's only been in the U.S. Senate for a year and a half or so, and in that time, he has done some serious work. They've tried to pass legislation. They've got a real agenda to try and push through. His staff are not just issuing press releases and going to social media events. They're actually workers, and they've got a strong understanding of the people who he's assembled. So Mike Lee is hoping that he'll be very active in the U.S. Senate, which had a cold relationship and continues to have a cold relationship with Donald Trump in the last administration. And if Donald Trump wins again, that relationship will seriously be helped by having a vice president who understands the chamber and is down there every day trying to push a more populist conservative agenda. Mike Lee is one of the leaders of that, and he's very excited to have that ally.
And there are big stars all over the RNC. And yesterday you got to talk to one of the rising stars. She is going to be a name that we are going to hear a lot about. Who did you catch up with?
I caught up with Riley Gaines, who's been a great leader in pushing back against men destroying women's sports. She was here with the American Principles Project and Orange County Choppers to claim a custom-made motorcycle just for her. We're here first with Riley Gaines, our first guest of the day.
Hello.
What brings you to the convention?
I guess what brings me here is the displeasure of having to say out loud that men and women are different. It's really that simple. We have this past 2 years or so since kind of being thrust into this position, I have found myself at the forefront at the state level, local level, even the federal level in merely fighting for safety and fairness in women's sports. And of course, this topic has expanded. It has become a lot more broad now, and where we're just seeing the overall erasure of women as a whole.
Is this your first convention?
It is. It's my first convention.
So you were politicized by this issue.
I was.
Are there others like you? Have you met a lot of people here out for the first time?
Tons. I can tell you, being a recent college graduate myself, the amount of girls especially, who are we're hearing and receiving the message loud and clear that is being sent to us. And it's that we don't matter. It's that our privacy doesn't matter, our safety doesn't matter, our equal opportunities don't matter. And so we have seen a ton of girls just like myself who wanted nothing to do in this space who now are finding themselves more inclined to get involved.
So what are your thoughts on the platform? I think there's more on transgender issues in this Republican platform than any time previously.
I think it's huge. Again, broader than just the sports stuff. We have seen an attack on parental rights. We have seen an attack on the safeguarding of children. Of course, we've seen an attack on women's rights. And so number 17 on the platform is keeping men out of women's sports. President Trump has said that he will, first day in office, basically reverse course of what the Biden administration has done illegally and administratively to Title IX and how they've abolished its original intent. So that is amazing. It is decisive. It's what we need to see.
She is a fighter, and we love what she is bringing to the Republican Party. But tensions are still high in Milwaukee. Julio Rosas is the national correspondent for Blaze Media. He's on the ground there. And Julio, Black Lives Matter is protesting again. What are they mad about this time?
Yesterday at around 1 p.m., about 7 blocks away from the RNC security perimeter, Columbus police officers from Ohio, bicycle officers, they witnessed 2 men fighting in the street, and they noticed that one of the men had 2 knives on him. And so they rushed over, they said to drop the knife. The man refused to do so, and body camera footage that was released yesterday showed that the man with the knives was charging at the other individual, and that's when 5 of the Columbus police officers shot and killed him. And so the March on the RNC coalition put the call out to protest because they were particularly mad that not only did a black man die, but they also said that it wasn't even by Milwaukee police officers, and they said that they had warned the city that the extra security that these officers were going to bring was going to cause problems because they didn't know the city, they didn't know the people. The protesters did say that the man who was killed was a homeless man in a nearby encampment. And so this is just kind of one of the things that they're blaming the Republicans for and the city for because of the extra security. But as we know, especially in light of Saturday's attempted assassination attempt, the extra police force from across the country is desperately needed to secure a big event like the RNC.
Well, thanks for bringing us the latest there from Milwaukee. And we'll actually have more. Harmeet Dhillon will join us from the RNC. Stay tuned. We'd like to thank Patriot Mobile for providing the Wi-Fi that is making this broadcast possible all convention long. They want to thank you for supporting us with a special offer. Please go to patriotmobile.com/RNC24 for a free month of service. The RNC is drawing the biggest names in American conservatism, including Center for American Liberty founder and Trump surrogate Harmeet Dhillon. Harmeet joins us now from Milwaukee. How is the RNC different this year from previous years?
Well, I was here in 2016 when we had a full convention, but the tone was very different. This time around, Republicans are 100% united behind President Trump, and the feeling of absolute unity, positivity, and what's at stake in this upcoming election, it couldn't be stronger. It's an incredible vibe here.
You led the prayer on Monday night that sparked a lot of debate online. Are you surprised that this has gotten so much attention?
Well, people should know that I did the exact same prayer with a little bit of different commentary before and after in 2016, and there was no controversy then. The RNC has actually had people of different faiths offer prayers at the RNC convention for decades, and so this is nothing new. And I would say that the vast majority of the comments I've gotten have been incredibly supportive. People are coming up to me here, random strangers, and hugging me, shaking my hand, and thanking me. I think what happens online, particularly with monetization, is that a tiny group of hateful and ignorant people have an oversized reach. And I understand that many people who are not ignorant or hateful had a problem with it. But honestly, as an RNC member, first of all, I'm a member of the RNC, so I'm not some random diversity hire. I'm entitled to be here, and I've always been included in programs. But secondly, we really need to be making sure we get every vote in this election cycle. And that means making all kinds of people from different walks of life feel comfortable and included in our party. And they haven't always felt that way. So I think it's great that the RNC has an eye on that. And the Trump campaign, which approved my prayer. And so I'm thrilled that I had the honor of doing that with President Trump in the audience. It is a prayer. It is a benediction. The prayer was for the voters, for the people who conduct our elections, the election workers, for the president, for all of us. So real honor, and I don't let the haters get me down.
Harmeet, we've been looking forward all week to asking you about the dismissal of the documents case and really the state of all the cases against Donald Trump right now. What are you thinking?
Well, look, first of all, I'm a law geek. I went to law school and graduated 31 years ago. And back in law school, Justice Scalia had issued an opinion called Morrison versus Olson that talked about the separation of powers and how important it was that we follow the constitutional norms. And so this has been a multi-decade struggle. This argument has been made in multiple cases where special counsels have been appointed and conservative legal scholars have been increasingly speaking out that this is the correct viewpoint. I'm thrilled that Judge Cannon made this ruling. It is absolutely correct, and she ruled very bluntly and clearly at the beginning of her opinion that the Constitution was violated in this appointment. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, Appointments Clause, which requires the President to appoint and Congress to approve that appointment. It did not happen, and so this has ripple effects in the New York case, in the other D.C. case, and of course the Fani Willis Georgia case is also on the ropes at this point. So I fully expect that if this decision is upheld, which I do expect at least to the 11th Circuit, I know this case is going to go to the Supreme Court at some point. The New York case has to be dismissed. The New York case is infirm because the evidence that was admitted in that case, thanks to their overplaying their hand and the overzealousness, including from a DOJ top official, they included testimony that is barred by the immunity clause that the Supreme Court has already ruled on. So that's going to be one fatal blow. And then this appointments clause issue is going to knock out, I think, ultimately the D.C. case as well. It's not going to happen quickly. It's not going to happen before the election. But President Trump has had an incredible winning streak of turning the tide of his fortune from the absolutely unconstitutional lawfare that has been deployed by the Democrats. They are trying to use all means necessary, and I don't mean all legal means, but all means necessary to keep him out of the White House. This assassination attempt that we just saw is an endpoint of the demagoguery that they've been pushing, and it includes all that lawfare. So I'm thrilled for the president. I'm thrilled that some of the legal precedents that I've been working on for him in civil cases in D.C. were used in that immunity ruling, and it's all coming together.
That is very well said. Thanks so much for joining us today, Harmeet.
Thanks for having me.
Steve Deace will be joining us to say why he's now backing Donald Trump and why you should too. That's up next. It's safe to say that Steve Deace has been one of the most vocal critics of Donald Trump on Blaze TV. He worked for Ted Cruz in 2016. He backed Ron DeSantis in this year's primary. But Steve has previously said that he would vote for Donald Trump, but now it feels like it's become something more after the attempted assassination. Saturday night, Steve even went out and put a Trump yard sign in his lawn and feels like he has a new perspective. Earlier today on X, he wrote in part, "The reality is for all of his flaws and for all of the things about him and his way of doing things, they have both flummoxed and frustrated me. The truth is that Trump has done more to fight the darkness seeping into this culture and threatening to overrun it since he came down that escalator in 2016 than the church has done collectively thus far this century. There's a reason that the darkness is shooting at Donald Trump instead of the church. The biggest problem America has is that most of her pastors are unworthy of being shot at." And Steve joins us right now. And it feels like this is a very different Deace. I mean, what's going on right now, Steve, in your mind with the way that things have unfolded since Saturday night?
Well, Jill, you've known me for a long time. I'm just peacefully grifting with the trade winds, as my mentions say, regardless of which opinion I give. Okay, so, but no. The shooting crystallized something for me, and when Trump pumped the fist and said fight, I frankly thought for the first time in a while that Donald Trump was talking to me, directly to me, And I'm not wired to be on the sideline, not wired to analyze a situation. I'm wired when there's a fight happening to be in it. And to be brutally honest, given the way that Trump has behaved throughout some of this campaign, and I'll give him benefit of the doubt that a lot of it may be because of distraction from lawfare, this has not been the same Trump of 2016. I mean, this has not been let's pick every based issue fight we can. It's been something different. And frankly, I was wondering, is he actually in the fight? You know, and sitting there, one of the most badass moments in American history, certainly the most iconic imagery country since 9/11, and to see him there with that natural energy, nothing is scripted, nothing's contrived, and that defiance, which basically I think sums up where a lot of us are trying to resist what's happening to this once exceptional and great country. I just thought, yeah, I need to be in this fight. I mean, if they're shooting at the guy, this is clearly where the fight is at, and I think that, you know, there's a perspective happening right now in light of a couple of the speaker choices that have been made at the convention, Jill. And, you know, if I were in charge, I wouldn't have invited Amber Rose to speak. But what I find interesting is that this reaction has gone from, I think, a justifiable moral criticism. It's now morphed into this thing like this was like God's own party before Trump arrived. This was like an extension of the Christian church. You grew up listening to my show, Jill, literally. Pre-Trump, as I was leading the evangelical fight against the GOP, they loved us, right, Jill?
They did not, Steve. They did not.
Afraid us. That's not true. And some of my fellow evangelicals are starting to sound like the corporatists in 2015 who didn't have the self-awareness to see that they're morphing into the uniparty is what gave the opening for a disruptor like Trump. Well, the same thing is happening here. I mean, this party, it was not George W. Bush, Mr. Born Again, who recognized Jerusalem as the rightful capital of Israel, appointed the justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. He appointed a couple of them, but he didn't even promise to do that. All right. It was Donald Trump that did those things. It was Donald Trump that brought stability, more stability than we've had in my time in the Middle East, rather than getting us more involved in pointless internecine fights. And so, you know, to me, in the end, I want to be where the fight is. And even though at times I don't get it, and I'm not good to get it, clearly, there's a part of whatever's happening in this era that I don't understand, and that's fine. But if they're freaking trying to kill the guy, all right, the spirit of the age is trying to kill the guy, then that's a proxy for me. And when I see things like libs of TikTok being criticized for going after even teachers or Home Depot workers who were cheering this on, I applauded wholeheartedly, because you have to understand the way these people think. If you're saying that you wish that Crooks would have not missed, well, you didn't hate Donald Trump before he came down that escalator to represent people like us. You thought he was funny. You thought he was great. One of the most popular celebrities in the world. So what you're really saying is because he represents people like us, you wish him dead, which is an extension really of saying you wish I'm dead. So you bet your ass I want to see some public and societal pressure and shaming and punishment for people who think it's okay to just start shooting people who represent me, because that's 5 minutes away from thinking it's okay to shoot me.
Steve, I'm listening to you and thinking the one thing that really strikes me about the heroism of Trump in this moment is that we already knew that they had thrown everything at him. Every major institution in this society, the majority of the popular, the powerful elites all came after him with everything they had, short of trying to kill him, and that just happened, and he survived in a miraculous moment that none of us will ever forget. So he remains defiant. And I can't help but think, given what you say about church leaders, that's sort of the opposite virtue, right? I mean, the one thing Trump has is that he's not afraid, he doesn't stop, and he keeps fighting. And, for whatever else his flaws. And then the other side of that, as you say, there's so many church leaders who are unworthy to be shot. And when I look at the way they talk about politics, I'm with them on a lot of moral issues, and we talk about people who really aren't doing the right thing on our side, and so forth and so on. That's just normal, though. That's human life. It's kind of this moral aesthetic that they have of the way this is what a party should look like. This is how it should work, right? And it's really about a LARP. It's sort of like it's like a dance or a fake play. It's a strange kind of thing. whereas the brutal reality of just that happened stands in stark contrast to them. I mean, what do you think? Do you think this has any impact on the church? Does it help to rise? People, will they rise up in response to this? I mean, do other people agree with you?
We're about to find out. But because I will tell you, if you read your scriptures, God often uses our own idols or the things that we perceive are less than us and not worthy of us to judge us and to shame us, and sometimes to replace his people in light of their refusal to fight, in light of their refusal to be faithful. And so, we spent a generation here within evangelicalism, Mark, trying to be purpose-driven. And part of that was we forsook one of our main purposes of being on this earth, which is to stand against the forces of darkness. And so, the analogy I would draw of what, because when I was on the Cruz campaign, we were trying to figure out, evangelical outreach was one of the things I was a part of. How is it that this guy with a tabloid magazine greatest hits album is more popular with Southern Baptists than this Southern Baptist senator? And eventually I came to the conclusion that, it's like an old Western. You would prefer that the Gary Cooper sheriff, the nice guy, the one you want your sons to grow up and be like, the ones you want to marry your daughters off to, you would prefer that he was the hero of the story, but he never showed up for the showdown in the town square. Never showed up. Okay, he had to get his cream rinse. Had to make sure his khakis were pleated, had to get a sweater vest, never showed up, had to have lunch with Mike Pence and practice bouncing their eyes every time a chick with yoga pants walked in. Just never showed up, okay? And eventually, you're so desperate to save your town that you'll turn to Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider, the drifter, the anti-hero. Now, there's going to be collateral damage with this. It might be your storefront that gets shot out. You might be caught in the crossfire, but you're so desperate to be rid of the banditos that you'll take that risk because it's that or you lose your town. And that's essentially what has happened here. The run of luck Donald Trump has had, luck in the last 19 days, we could just do an entire show on that. That's unprecedented in American political history. I think it is clear on some level that there is some favor here of that God is using this guy to do things that his people, the church, should have done for a generation, but was way more interested in building megapolises and Protestant monasticism in the suburbs than really actually engaging the fight and getting into the fight. Way more interested in being nicer than God, than the blood sport of spiritual warfare. And so I think God said, okay, fine. I'll call myself out here, another Samson here, and we'll do it with him. And I've wondered this. You guys know me well enough to know I debate my own positions with myself all the time. Okay. And so I've considered that this was a possibility for many, many years, but it really didn't come to fruition to me until I saw they took a shot at him. And I'm talking about the darkness. Demons often refer to themselves as they in the scriptures. And the way that he defiantly reacted to that, you cannot fake that. You can't script that. That is something that just comes viscerally to you. And that was kind of the moment for me that it was just like, you hear that still small voice sometimes, the believer. And it was just like, you are supposed to be in this fight. And so I'm in it.
Steve, you've already said you would not have Amber Rose on the stage if it was up to you at the RNC. But what are your overall thoughts on how it has been going in Milwaukee thus far?
I think that I'm in a lot, like all of us are these days. I'm in several private chats with people and activists and stuff like us around the country. And there's some of my fellow evangelicals that are beyond verklempt about some of the speaker choices. And pulling out things like Reagan's pastel, speech he gave at CPAC back in 1976. I think that was the first CPAC, actually. And I'm asking them questions like, have you considered, though, that we're not the same culture as 1976, that this is a godless culture now. And I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying I'm cheering it, but I think we should at least consider the possibility that Trump is not just picking Amber Rose because of New York values, trying to liberalize the Republican Party. Maybe the guy actually knows how to read a market, knows how to brand to customers. And the reality is the church has been so vapid, so shallow, and so out of the fight for a generation in America that more people may resonate, sadly, more people may resonate with Amber Rose than they might if we sent another sweater-vested, pleated khaki Bible verse memorizer up to the stage instead. And I just take these things that we're frankly upset about that's happening at this convention. I think they're more of an indictment of American evangelicalism and the failure collectively of small O orthodoxy within the church. There's very few priests in Catholicism that know what time it is, let alone pastors in Protestantism. I take these things as frankly judgments against the church for refusing to fulfill its core mission in the last generation. And this is the kind of stuff you get, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. But this is what happens when you ask a political party to step into a void the church is supposed to, is you're going to get more coalitions than convictions. That's just the reality. If you want more convictions than coalitions, then the institution that gives us our convictions and stands for them outside of time and space, the church, has to do its job.
Donald Trump is playing the game. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Thanks so much for joining us, Steve.
You bet.
We highlight one of the Democrat doctors' crusades to save America from Anthony Fauci. Up next. Well, many of us have tried to put COVID in the rearview mirror. Leon Wolf, Blaze Media's managing news editor, isn't letting the past or Anthony Fauci get off that easy. Leon has released part 3 of his chronicle about Dr. Richard Ebright's fight to save the world from Fauci on theblaze.com. And Leon, this covers your third trilogy, and it goes back to 2020 and the COVID lockdown. So how did Ebright respond to Fauci's meteoric rise during the COVID era?
You know, I can only imagine really what he must have felt. And, I've interviewed him twice now, and he's just not the kind of guy who deals in a lot of kind of navel gazing and introspection. I mean, the guy is a research biochemist. But it clearly, when you talk to him, really galls him to see that here is this guy who he's been, combating really for the better part of 20 years. And he's been warning people, look, this guy is going to get us all killed. He's funding this research that's very dangerous, this gain of function research. One day it's going to leak from a lab and millions of people are going to die. That very thing happened, we think. And, the end result of that was that most of the world viewed him as a hero for the first 6 months of the pandemic. I can't even imagine how that must have felt to him to watch all of this unfold. But I do think that hopefully now it's becoming more of a thing that history is reevaluating Fauci's place in this whole thing. And hopefully as time goes on, that'll become even more so.
And Leon, we should mention that Dr. Ebright is a Democrat. So this isn't political for him. This crusade was coming out as just something that he could see in the medical field.
That's correct. And it's so interesting to me to watch as I kind of dug into this. Fauci, of course, was appointed to this position that he's in by Ronald Reagan. Yeah, he's been around for that long. But really, he came into the prominence as the guy who was defending the gain of function research during the Bush-Cheney administration. He was actually put in that position by Dick Cheney because Cheney wanted to have a robust kind of biodefense program. He felt like our biodefense posture was weak. And so he went to the Department of Defense and he asked the Department of Defense, you guys need to put together a program that does this and this and that. The Department of Defense kept coming back to him and saying, we have a review board that's supposed to evaluate whether what you're doing could be turned into a biological weapon, and therefore we can't do this project. So Cheney got frustrated. He went looking for somebody in the administration who didn't have a civilian review board, who was going to evaluate this stuff, and who would be willing to conduct these dangerous experiments, and he found Anthony Fauci. So 20 years ago, if you look back, and for those people who are old enough to remember, Fauci was not popular with Democrats or with the media. He was a creature of the Bush-Cheney administration, and that's where Richard Ebright first founded him and started having these conflicts with him. It's only since the start of the pandemic and some really fortuitous events that Fauci has become a liberal hero. It's one of the more bizarre tales in all of history how this happened. But the reality is that Ebright it's not a partisan thing for him. He just doesn't want the world to get wiped out by a far worse pandemic than what we saw with COVID-19, as bad as that was.
Leon, I appreciate this series so much. It's such an important topic, and we've been happy to publish it, and it's incredible. People really should go to theblaze.com and read this thing. It gives you basically a short history of the entire deal, and it's maddening. I'm curious, while you were writing this, what came out that surprised you the most in looking back at this history?
I was surprised. We saw on Saturday with former President Trump. And I remember the first time I watched that video, the first time I actually saw the video, you actually texted it to me. I was out with friends and I saw it, and I pulled at the video and I said to the people who were next to me, oh my God, if he hadn't, that was my first impression. If he hadn't turned his head at that last second, he'd be dead right now. I mean, and the thing I thought most as I thought back about this series is how close we as a species have come to the same thing. How many close calls there have already been. I mean, if we said, look, we already took one bullet, which was COVID-19, we think, as a result of this research, but it could have been so much worse. There have been so many times that labs have had accidents and leaks that could have turned into literally world-ending pandemics, and we just missed by exactly what we did. It's just like we turned our head at the last minute, just like former President Trump did. It really and truly is remarkable, and I want to encourage people who are skeptical about this and who don't understand this to go read the series and read, because I talked about probably about a dozen of the most high-profile incidents, but there are dozens more. It happens all the time that these labs leak. It happens all the time. And next time it might not be something that kills 1% of the people it infects. Next time it might be something that kills 10% of the people it infects, or 50, or worse. And we can't even imagine what the world would be like if that were to happen. We just can't.
Leon, it's such a sobering thought. Thanks so much for joining us and for the work that you've done on theblaze.com.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
And Matthew, what he mentions there is just, this has happened time and time again. And we only see a few of the incidents.
Yeah, that's one of the most disturbing things that's going on here. It's that they've already normalized this behavior. The government thinks it's okay to do this research. There's no accountability for what they did before. We know that COVID is government-funded research, and no one's going to pay the fiddlers, right? So he's not wrong. We have to wonder, you got away with that one. What happens next time? It's part of a theme, though. It's unaccountable government, and no one so far is able to punish anyone for actual wrongdoing.
I would love to be able to say that there's not going to be a next time, but I think now what we've seen throughout history, and the more that we learn and the more that we read, we know that this is going to happen again. And as Leon mentioned in his article, he documents time and time and time again, and this could happen really at any moment. So be sure to go check out his piece, and that will do it for us here on Blaze News Tonight, because we will have, though, more coverage for you from the Republican National Convention the rest of the week. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to go rate and review, because that helps get word out for the show. So if you like Blaze News Tonight, be sure to hit us up on YouTube and your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.